Hello, my creepy midnighters, and welcome back to another episode of disturbing Ouija board Reddit horror story. Alright, boom! I just woke up this morning thinking like, okay, today's the day. I'm gonna get finally this video up, and not gonna be lazy, no excuses, and then immediately spend the next 4 hours arguing with a bot on my bank's customer service line because apparently someone in Nebraska tried to order $900 worth of camping gear using my debit card. Bro, I didn't even go outside. So that was my morning. Then I was like, alright, whatever. I'll just grab coffee, rest the vibes, record tonight. But of course, the universe had other plans for me. Because right as I sit down to film, bam, power flickers, my mic tweaks out, and suddenly my laptop's possessed by whatever demon lives in Adobe Premiere. So yeah, that's why this one's late. My bad, yo, but listen to the story.
I'm a night shift nurse for the sole survivor of a brutal crime, and I found a Ouija board hidden in his hospital bandages. It's not spelling out the names of the dead. It's spelling out the exact weight of the organs the surgeons just removed from the patient in the next room. So, I was halfway through microwaving leftover pad thai at 3:17 this morning when I realized I hadn't spoken out loud in almost 2 days. Like, not even a hello to the mail guy, not a voice memo, not a sneeze, nothing. Just silence and screen glow, and the occasional groan of the building settling like it's got something trapped in the walls. And I don't know why, but that moment hit different. You ever get so quiet, it feels like you're not alone anymore? Like the silence is paying attention. I dumped the noodles in the trash, appetite gone, sat on the kitchen floor for like an hour, scrolling Reddit, trying to drown out this presence, I guess. But it didn't help. Every post felt too loud. Every shadow looked intentional. And there's a reason for that. I haven't talked about this before. Not out loud, not online, not even in my own goddamn journal. But it's been rotting in my head long enough that I think it's starting to grow legs. So whatever happens, whatever this is, I need to get it out before it finds a better way in. Here's what happened. I picked up the night shift because I needed the extra cash. Rent in Philly's gone up again, no surprise. And student loans weren't going to pay themselves. So when the hospital asked if I wanted to cover the psych ward post-op wing for the next few weeks, I said yes before I even asked why the last nurse left. The patient was labelled as high risk, non-verbal, no contact, which was weird. Usually when it's no contact, it's because of behaviour. Assault risks, self-harm, something like that. But this guy, room 409, he'd been unconscious for days. No visitors, no social. They didn't even use his name on the records. Just JD. It was only my second night when I noticed the weird thing with the bandages. Now look, I've seen some gnarly stuff in trauma units. People come in sliced, burned, bleeding out from places they shouldn't be bleeding. But this guy didn't look like that. Not anymore. He was post-op, stitched and clean. He had this wide abdominal incision, stapled up and wrapped in layers of gauze. Nothing abnormal. But when I went to change the dressings that second night, I saw something off. The bandages had writing on them. Not like blood seepage or marker from surgery. Actual ink. Tiny, cramped black lettering almost like it was burned into the fabric, etched with heat instead of written by hand. I thought maybe a doctor made notes on the inside layer somehow, but the text wasn't medical. It didn't say change in 12 hours or check for infection. It said 2.3 pounds, liver, segment 4B missing, incision unwitnessed. I just stared at it. My stomach dropped. We had a liver transplant earlier that day, 2 rooms down. It had gone well. I'd even helped the intern clean up after. I remembered her cracking a joke about how the patient looked like a deflated football. I checked the timestamp from the surgical log. 6:32 p.m. They removed 2.3 pounds of donor liver tissue. I remember thinking, okay, weird coincidence. I took a picture of the bandage. iPhone flash made it look even worse, like it was scorched into the fibers, like the letters weren't on the gauze, but in it. I peeled it back, the layer underneath. More writing. Kidney, 0.47 kilograms. Surgical time, 2:13 a.m. Prognosis, fading. There was no way. I turned on the hallway lights and went through the patient logs. Room 411 had a nephrectomy that night. Exact time, 2:13 a.m. Partial removal due to trauma. I remember just sitting there in the hallway, cold air blowing out of the vent above me, just staring at the screen, rereading the same line over and over. This wasn't a mistake. And JD, the man in room 409, he hadn't moved. Not once. His eyes never opened. Vitals, flat but stable. Sedation dose, minimal. No brain activity spikes. He just laid there, breathing slow and shallow. I asked a resident that morning if the patient had ever spoken. She looked at me like I was asking if he danced the Macarena. Dude, he's been out since day 1. You know how they found him, right? I shook my head. Only survivor in a farmhouse. 4 bodies around him, all skinned. Dude wasn't even injured, just catatonic. Doctors think it was shock. I tried to ask more, but she just waved me off and went back to her clipboard. That day, I should have asked to transfer. I should have gone home, deleted the photo, convinced myself it was a prank. But I didn't, because that night, something new was waiting under the gauze. And it wasn't just another weight. It was a name I knew. And that's when everything changed. You ever have that moment where your heart sinks before your brain understands why? Like your body knows something's wrong before you catch up? That's what hit me when I peeled the bandages back that third night. It was 2:42 a.m. Quiet as hell. You could hear the coffee machine wheezing down the hall, and some poor bastard crying through morphine dreams in recovery. I'd gone in to check vitals like I was supposed to. Room 409 was dead silent, except for the steady beep of the monitor and the faint, damp rattle of his breath. That sound always bothered me. Like it wasn't coming from his lungs, but deeper, like something else inside was exhaling. Watching. Anyway, I'm pulling the gauze away, gloves sticking a little from dried antiseptic, and I see the usual at first. Numbers, weights, surgical lingo. But then I freeze. Because this time, underneath the clinical lines, there's a name. Scrawled in jagged, smeared ink like it had been clawed into the fabric. Marcus Liang. And that name hit me like a punch to the chest. Because Marcus Liang wasn't a patient. Not here. He was a surgeon. One of the attending staff. Mid-40s, neat guy. Obsessed with rules. Used to give me crap if my ID badge wasn't clipped straight. Always had his iPad under one arm and a bottle of Diet Coke in the other. And that night, that exact night, he wasn't answering his pager. I know, because I'd been trying to reach him for almost an hour. We had a med supply mix-up and he was the on-call supervisor. I figured he went home early. Happens sometimes. But I pulled up the staff log just to check. No sign out. That's against protocol. I walked down to the doctor's lounge. Empty. Lights off. His locker was shut. Locked. Car still in the garage, I'd later find out. Just gone. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when I shined my phone light back on the gauze and saw the new line beneath his name. Mass. 276 grams. Removed. Unsanctioned. Location. Within. Within? What? I leaned in. The letters pulsed in the light, like they were shifting. I swear to you, I saw one of the letters move, like it rearranged itself when I blinked. I stumbled back, nearly tripped over the IV pole. My phone hit the floor and slid under the bed. The screen lit up underneath, and for a second, I saw his face. JD's face. But it wasn't the same. His mouth was parted now. Not like he was breathing, like he was smiling. Real slow, real wrong. No vitals changed. The machine still beeped steady, like nothing had happened. But I felt it in my chest, like a hot wire being pulled through my ribs. He was awake, not in the brain scan sense, not like, oh hey, maybe he's recovering. No, I mean he was conscious. He was aware of me, of what I'd just read, and that smile wasn't for show. It was a warning. They found Marcus the next day, or parts of him. Maintenance called it in after a mop got jammed in a drain behind the surgical theatre. Took them a few minutes to realize what it was. His jawbone was the first thing they pulled up, not his whole face, just the lower jaw, stripped down to the root, like it had been boiled and chewed. The molars were still intact. One of them had a chunk of rubber glove embedded in it. Weirdest part, no blood. Like he was carved somewhere else and just left there. That same day, security reviewed the cameras. Marcus never left the hospital. No footage of him exiting the floor. Last time he was seen was, you guessed it, walking into room 409. He signed in on the clipboard, but there was no footage of him walking out. Just a 15-minute gap in the feed. Blank. Then the video skips, and JD's door is closed again. They blamed the whole thing on the camera system being buggy, replaced the hardware, reprimanded tech. But I knew. Something happened in that room. And whatever it was, it didn't get caught on tape. I started watching him every night. Not in a nursey, check vitals kind of way. I mean, watched. Sat in the far corner with the lights low. Eyes on the bed. Barely blinking. I brought my own flashlight. I stopped using the hospital gear because the hospital was lying. They said the bandages were standard, that I was probably projecting stress. They took away the sample I tried to submit, said it had no anomalous material. Bullshit. They burned it. I know the smell of medical incinerator paper. That gauze didn't go to a lab. It went to the furnace. And JD? He just laid there, night after night, looking more and more alive. His skin was wrong. Not pale like before. Flushed. Like something under it was warming up. His veins pulsed faster, even though the monitors stayed flat. I checked his IV twice. It wasn't feeding him anything, just saline and trace vitamins. No blood. No meds. No reason for him to be healing. But he was. His eyes were sealed shut, like always. But one night, I swear, I saw something crawling under the lid. Like a twitch. Like a finger tapping from the inside. The next time I changed his gauze, I hesitated. I didn't want to look. But of course I did. This time, the text wasn't surgical at all. It was a question. Who else knows? Under that, a list. Names. Mine was the last one. And under my name, 3 words in a new kind of ink. Reddish, still damp, almost breathing on the fabric. Wrist, tongue, eye. I dropped the bandage and stumbled back. My ID lanyard caught on the bed rail and snapped clean off. I bolted out of the room, down the hall. Didn't stop until I hit the ER desk. I don't even remember what I told them. Something about a panic attack. They sent me home. I didn't sleep for 3 days. When I finally came back, they'd moved him. No one would tell me where. The new night nurse didn't even know who I meant. Room 409, empty. Been empty for days. I said, no, the man, JD, the survivor. The one who... She just blinked at me, then said, oh, you mean Ward 0? My stomach clenched. Ward 0 was shut down years ago. It wasn't on the maps anymore. It used to be part of the site lockdown floor, before the state got involved. Rumor was, someone died during an experimental sedation trial. They never cleared out the floor, just sealed it. Nobody worked there. Nobody went there, unless they didn't want the patient found. I knew I was in too deep. I knew something was watching me, waiting for me to dig too far. But it was too late, because when I got home that night, there was a package in front of my door. No return label, just my name. Sharpie, thick letters, slanted, as if written in a moving car. Inside, a single hospital bandage, still damp, still warm, and written across the center, stitched like it had been threaded through the gauze itself. I, 29 grams. Removed. Soon. And below that, Ouija board. Activate. His body is the planchette. The package sat on my kitchen counter for almost an hour while I just stood there, staring at it, keys still in my hand, jacket half off, like if I didn't touch it again it might decide it had the wrong address and crawl back out the door on its own. It didn't. The bandage inside kept pulling my eyes back to it, even folded up, even shoved halfway under a grocery receipt like I was trying to suffocate it with normal life. It felt loud, like it was humming. I could hear the fridge kicking on and off, a car splashing through rain outside, my upstairs neighbor pacing. But underneath all of that, there was this thin, mosquito whine vibration drilling straight into my teeth. I told myself I was overtired. I'd had 3 hours of sleep in 2 days. People hallucinate from less. I made coffee I didn't want, burned my tongue on it, and forced myself to unfold the bandage again. The words hadn't changed. I, 29 grams. Removed. Soon. Ouija board. Activate. His body is the planchette. I kept rereading that last sentence, trying to make it metaphorical. Some edgy internet prank. Some sick ARG. Someone from the hospital was running. But every time I blinked, I pictured JD's mouth hanging open in that bed, that wrong little smile stretching the corners like the skin didn't fit right, and I knew where I had to go. Not to the hospital, not yet. To my laptop. I wish I could tell you. I hesitated before opening the deep web, that I paced around, argued with myself, called a friend. I didn't. My hands were already moving before the fear caught up. I dragged the blackout curtains shut, killed the lights, and sat on the floor with my back against the couch, like I was building a little bunker out of cheap IKEA furniture. Tor loaded slow, the purple onion icon spinning like it was enjoying the suspense. I kept glancing at the front door. Every tiny building noise sounded like footsteps stopping right outside my apartment. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, so I typed the only thing that made sense. His body is the planchette. No results at first. Just dead links and empty directories. Then a forum thread popped up with a title that made my throat tighten. Project Planchette. Archive. It wasn't flashy. No creepy graphics. No edgy hacker aesthetic. Just a white page with black text and a login prompt. Under it was a line in small font. Authorized medical personnel only. I don't know why I tried my hospital credentials. They shouldn't have worked. That portal wasn't connected to anything public. But my fingers typed them in anyway. Muscle memory from 1,000 chart logins. The page opened. What loaded wasn't a forum. It was a patient file. No name. Just a rotating 3D scan of a human body. Organs highlighted in soft clinical colors. Each organ had a number next to it. Weight, status. And as I watched, the numbers shifted. The liver value ticked down by a fraction of a gram. A timestamp flashed beside it. The exact current time. My phone buzzed on the floor next to me. A hospital notification from the internal app I forgot to mute. Surgery complete. Partial hepatic resection. The same weight that disappeared from the 3D model appeared in the notification. I felt my stomach drop through the floor. The model wasn't generic. It was him. Every surgery in that building was being mirrored onto JD's body in real time. Not physically, not in a way you could see with the naked eye, but digitally, ritually, like the hospital had turned him into a ledger made of flesh. I scrolled. There were tabs at the top of the page. Logs, contributors, board. My cursor hovered over board for a full minute before I clicked. The screen went black. Then letters faded in, arranged in a circle like a cheap Halloween Ouija graphic. Yes and no in the corners. Numbers along the bottom. In the center was a small dot, pulsing. It moved. Not with my mouse. On its own. Sliding from letter to letter with a wet, dragging smoothness that made my skin crawl. He is. The word hung there. My apartment felt suddenly too small. The air thick. I realized I'd been holding my breath and let it out in a shaky hiss. The dot started moving again. Watching. A cold sweat broke across my back. I slammed the laptop shut so hard the sound cracked through the room. For a second, I just sat there in the dark, heart hammering, waiting for something to happen. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A text message. Don't disconnect. It confuses him. I don't remember unlocking the laptop. I just remember the screen being open again. The Ouija interface waiting. The dot was still. Patient. Another message came through. You're already in the session. Closing the window doesn't end it. My fingers felt numb as I typed back. Who is this? The reply was instant. We maintain the board. You're assigned to the vessel. Assigned. Like this was a shift. Like I'd clocked into some job I never applied for. The dot moved again. Turn. Then it stopped. A pressure built in my right ear, sharp and sudden, like altitude sickness. I clutched my head and squeezed my eyes shut. The pressure slid down my jaw, into my throat, and for a horrifying second, I couldn't swallow. It felt like something was stuck there. Something small and hard, lodged behind my tongue. I ran to the bathroom and gagged over the sink, fingers digging into my neck. My reflection looked wrong. My pupils were blown wide, swallowing the color of my eyes. When I opened my mouth, I saw it. A tiny square of wood, slick with saliva, wedged under my tongue. I hooked it out with shaking fingers. It was no bigger than a fingernail. A splintered shard etched with a single letter. Y. the sink filled with the metallic taste of blood where it had cut me. I spat and stared at the piece of wood trembling in my palm. It was a fragment of a planchette. My phone buzzed again. He's sinking. Don't resist. It damages the interface. I staggered back to the living room. The laptop screen was flashing. The 3D body model was gone. In its place was a live camera feed. Room 409. Or what used to be room 409. The angle was wrong. Too high, like it was mounted in the ceiling. JD lay on the bed, but his restraints were gone. His arms rested at his sides, palms up, fingers twitching in tiny, insectile movements. The dot on the Ouija board began to move in frantic, jerking lines. Cold. I felt it then. A chill crawling up from the floor, seeping into my bones. My breath fogged in front of me. The temperature in my apartment was dropping fast, the air turning sharp and dry. On the screen, JD's chest rose in a slow inhale, and my lungs mirrored it. I couldn't stop it. My body copied his breathing exactly. Every shallow drag of air pulling icy needles into my chest. Panic clawed up my throat. I tried to gasp, to break the rhythm, but my muscles wouldn't listen. The dot spelled again. Open J. Dee's eyes snapped open. They were wrong. The whites were a deep, bruised red, veins spider webbing out from pupils so black they looked like holes punched through his skull. He stared straight up at the camera. At me. His mouth opened wider than it should have. The corners split with a soft tearing sound I swear I could hear through the speakers. Inside wasn't a tongue or teeth or anything human. It was a dark cavity, packed with tiny, shifting letters, crawling over each other like maggots made of ink. They spilled out as he exhaled. Not physically. The letters poured through the screen, flooding the Ouija board interface, rearranging themselves into a single line that stretched from one side of my laptop to the other. Your turn. Something yanked inside my skull, a violent, nauseating lurch. For a heartbeat, I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was in a hospital bed. Straps bit into my wrists. The smell of antiseptic and old blood clogged my nose. Overhead lights burned white and merciless. I tried to scream and felt stitches pulled tight across my abdomen. I looked down. My torso was a roadmap of incisions. Fresh sutures crisscrossed older scars. Skin puckered and angry. Transparent tubes snaked out of me, carrying cloudy fluids into hanging bags labeled with neat printed weights. Hands moved around me. Gloved. Efficient. They didn't belong to anyone I could see. Just hands, reaching into me with practiced ease, lifting something warm and slick from my body. I felt the absence more than the pain. A sudden hollowness, like a room inside me had been emptied. A voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere, calm and clinical. Transfer complete. The weight on the bag matched a number burning behind my eyes. 29 grams. My vision snapped back to my apartment. I collapsed onto the floor, retching dryly, hands clawing at my stomach. My shirt was damp with sweat, but my skin was intact. No stitches, no blood. The laptop chimed softly. On the screen, the 3D body model had returned. A new label blinked into existence beside the eye. Status, pending harvest. And next to it, in smaller text, assigned nurse. I won't mention any names. My phone buzzed one last time. Report to Ward 0. The procedure continues at 3:30. I looked at the clock. 3:12 a.m. And even as terror locked every muscle in my body, my legs were already moving, carrying me to the door like I was on rails, like the path to the hospital had been carved into me long before I ever agreed to that night shift. The drive to the hospital felt shorter than it ever had, like the city had folded in on itself just to get me there faster. Street lights smeared into pale streaks on the windshield, and I don't remember stopping at a single red light. My phone sat in the cup holder with the screen black, but I could feel it watching me, the way you feel a person staring at the back of your head. The parking garage was almost empty. My tires echoed too loud against the concrete, every sound stretching and bouncing like the building was hollow. I parked on autopilot and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, waiting for my body to catch up with what I was doing. I didn't want to go inside. Every instinct I had was screaming that if I walked back into that hospital at this hour, I wasn't coming out the same. But underneath the fear was something worse, a pulling sensation, gentle but relentless, like a hook sunk deep behind my ribs, and someone was reeling me in. When I stepped out of the car, the air smelled wrong, not like the usual city mix of exhaust and wet asphalt. It smelled sterile, clean, like disinfectant bleeding out of the hospital walls and soaking the night. The main entrance doors slid open without me touching them. No security guard at the desk. No sleepy receptionist scrolling through her phone. The lobby lights were dimmed to a sickly yellow, casting long shadows that pooled in the corners. My footsteps sounded muted on the tile. Swallowed. The elevators were waiting with their doors open. All of them. Every car empty, lit, humming softly. I didn't press a button. The closest one closed around me on its own, and the panel lit up with a floor that wasn't labeled. Just a blank square. The elevator dropped. It wasn't a smooth descent. It felt like falling in slow motion, my stomach floating up into my throat. The numbers on the display skipped past the basement level and kept going, the digits flickering into symbols I didn't recognize. My ears popped. The air grew heavier, thicker, like I was being buried alive in increments. When the doors opened, the smell hit me first. It was sweet and rotten at the same time, like flowers left too long in a sealed room. The hallway beyond was narrow and low-ceilinged, the paint peeling in long curls that exposed older layers underneath. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, some of them flickering in a rhythm that made my eyes ache. A sign hung crooked on the wall. Ward 0. The letters were scratched in, not printed, carved deep enough that the edges were ragged. I stepped out, and the elevator doors slid shut behind me with a final sealing click. I spun around and jabbed at the button panel. Nothing happened. The doors didn't even acknowledge me. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with doors that had no windows. Each one bore a number scrawled in the same carved style as the sign. The air was warmer here, damp against my skin. I could hear something faint under the hum of the light. Breathing. Not one person. Many. A layered chorus of inhales and exhales. Some shallow, some ragged, overlapping in a way that made it impossible to tell where one ended and another began. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking fingers. A single message. Room 0. End of hall. I walked. The floor felt soft under my shoes, like the tile was flexing. With every step, the breathing grew louder. It filled my ears, synced with my pulse, until I couldn't tell which rhythm was mine. Room 0 was different from the others. Its door was metal, thick and seamless, with no handle. In the center was a circular indentation shaped exactly like the planchette fragment I'd pulled from under my tongue. My hand moved before I told it to. I pressed my palm against the indentation. The metal was warm. It softened under my touch, rippling like liquid. My hand sank into it up to the wrist, and a sensation like icy fingers wrapping around my bones shot up my arm. I tried to pull back, but the door held me fast. Something slid into place inside my head with an audible click. The door dissolved. The room beyond was enormous, bigger than the footprint of the hospital should have allowed. The ceiling arched high overhead, lost in shadow. The walls were lined with hospital beds arranged in a perfect circle, each one occupied. Bodies lay strapped to the mattresses. Men, women, children. Their skin was a uniform grey, stretched tight over frames that looked drained and fragile. Tubes and wires threaded into them, all converging toward the center of the circle. Toward him. JD stood upright in the middle of the room, not lying in a bed. Standing. His body was crisscrossed with the same tubes, feeding into his torso like roots into soil. His head lolled forward, chin resting on his chest. But his eyes were open. They tracked me as I stepped inside, rolling up to meet mine without his head ever lifting. The floor beneath him was covered in symbols etched deep into the concrete. Circles within circles, lines connecting points in a pattern that hurt to look at too long. At the very center was a wooden Ouija board, oversized and stained dark, with something that had seeped into the grain. The planchette resting on it was made of bone. I recognized the curve of it. A human pelvis, carved and polished until it gleamed. The breathing I'd been hearing came from the beds. Every patient inhaled and exhaled in perfect unison, their chests rising and falling like a single organism. With each breath, the tubes pulsed, carrying a viscous, luminous fluid into JD's body. He was drinking them. Not blood, not anything so simple, Something brighter. Their warmth, their weight, the invisible measures that made them alive. A figure stepped out of the shadows behind him. At first, I thought it was another doctor. White coat, gloves, a surgical mask obscuring the lower half of the face. But the proportions were wrong. Too tall. The limbs too long. Joints bending with a fluid, insect grace. The mask turned toward me. There was no face behind it. Just darkness stretching back forever. A hollow that swallowed the light. "You're late," it said. And the voice wasn't sound. It was pressure. A thumb pressed hard against my thoughts. My legs carried me forward until I stood at the edge of the etched circle. I could feel the symbols vibrating through the soles of my shoes. A low thrum that resonated in my teeth. "What is this?" The words scraped out of my throat raw and small. "Continuity," the figure replied. "He is the ledger. We are the accountants. You are the hand that writes." It gestured to the board. The bone planchette lifted on its own and hovered, trembling, then settled back down with a soft clack. The letters around it writhed, rearranging themselves into columns of numbers that scrolled endlessly. Weights, measures, totals. Every surgery in the hospital fed into this room. Every incision, every extraction. The patients in the beds were being balanced against those numbers. Their lives shaved down in precise increments to pay an impossible debt. JD's mouth opened, and a sound spilled out that made my knees buckle. It was a chorus of voices layered on top of each other, whispering, sobbing, laughing. The voices of the farmhouse dead, of Marcus, of people I didn't know and somehow recognized anyway. They were inside him, stored, catalogued. The figure extended a hand toward me. Its fingers split at the tips, unfolding into delicate instruments that gleamed wetly in the dim light. "Your contribution," it said. Pain bloomed behind my right eye. A sharp, drilling agony that made my vision strobe. I clutched my face and felt something warm trickle between my fingers. The number 29 burned across my sight. I understood then with a clarity that cut through the terror. The board wasn't predicting a future harvest. It was collecting a payment that had already been decided. The patients in the beds inhaled as one. The room swelled with their borrowed breath. The bone planchette jerked, spelling a single word over and over as the figure's instruments reached for me. Due, due. And as the tips of those impossible fingers brushed my skin, I felt my eye begin to loosen in its socket. The world tilting as something inside me prepared to be carefully, lovingly removed. There's a moment when pain stops being sharp and turns into something vast and distant. Like your body can't afford to keep screaming, so it pushes the sensation far away and lets you watch it happen from a safe corner. That's where I went when they took my eye. I didn't feel fingers digging or anything so cleanly surgical. It was a slow suction a gentle tug that made my vision ripple. The room stretched like melted plastic. JD's figure elongated, the circle of beds bending into a warped halo around him. My right side went dark first. Not black exactly, but full of moving static, like a dead TV channel whispering inches from my brain. Something slid free with a wet, internal pop. The pressure vanished, and in its place came a weightless clarity that terrified me more than the pain ever could. I could still see, not with my missing eye, with something else. The room peeled open like a diagram. Layers separated. I saw the patients on the beds, not as bodies, but as glowing silhouettes, their insides mapped in thin lines of light. Every organ shimmered with a number suspended above it, flickering like a digital readout. Streams of pale energy flowed from them into JD, threading through the tubes in elegant arcs. I looked down at myself. My own chest was transparent. My ribs hung around my lungs like the bars of a cage, and behind them, something new pulsed. A dark knot tangled with threads of that same luminous current. A number hovered beside it, unstable, cycling too fast to read. The figure with the empty mask held my eye between its split fingers. It wasn't bloody. It was polished, gleaming like glass. Inside the iris, letters churned in a tight spiral. The bone planchette snapped to attention and began to glide. 29G. The number locked into place. The spiral in my eye stilled. The figure pressed it to JD's forehead. His skin opened without tearing, parting like a curtain. The eye sank into him and vanished. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then every patient in the circle inhaled sharply, their glowing forms flaring bright enough to burn. The numbers above them all dropped at once. A collective subtraction. JD's head tilted back. His mouth widened again, and this time what poured out wasn't letters. It was breath. A storm of it. Warm, humid air that smelled like 1,000 different lungs exhaling at once. It rushed over me and into me, filling the hollow where my eye had been with a pressure that wasn't physical. Memories flooded in. Not mine. I saw a child's birthday party through frosting-smeared vision. A woman staring at her phone in a dark kitchen, rereading a message she didn't want to answer. A man gripping a steering wheel and trying not to cry in traffic. Moments stacked and layered, ordinary and intimate, torn from strangers and crammed into my skull until I thought it would split. I staggered, choking on other people's lives. The figure spoke again, and the pressure of its voice steadied the chaos just enough for me to understand. He stores them. We balance them. You distribute. I don't want this, I said, or tried to. The words came out doubled, tripled, echoing with voices that weren't mine. You already accepted, it replied. You crossed the threshold. You touched the board. The ledger requires a keeper. The patient's glowing forms were dimming. Their numbers were stabilizing at lower values, settling into a new equilibrium. Some of the lights flickered weakly, on the verge of going out. Panic cut through the haze. They're dying. They are contributing, the figure corrected. As you will. The bone planchette jerked toward me. It skated across the board in frantic strokes, carving a message I felt etching itself into the inside of my skull. Transfer authorized. The tubes feeding into JD writhed. Several detached with a slick, organic sound and slithered across the floor toward me. I tried to back away, but the etched circle caught my heels like a snare. The tubes found my ankles, my wrists, my throat, adhering with a cold kiss. Something began to flow. It wasn't warmth this time. It was a density. Weight in its purest sense. The gravity of bodies and organs and existence itself pouring through those lines and into me. My transparent chest darkened as the knot behind my ribs swelled, gorged on the incoming mass. Across the circle, the patient's silhouettes brightened. Their numbers ticked upward, restored gram by gram. Color seeped back into their grey skin. Fingers twitched. Eyes fluttered beneath lids. They were being paid back. With me. The realization landed heavy and absolute. I was becoming the counterweight. The deficit made flesh. JD's gaze locked onto mine. And for the first time, there was something like recognition there. Not pity, not malice. Just a tired acknowledgement. The look of someone watching another person step into a trap they'd long since accepted. His lips moved. No sound came out, but the words appeared in my head with perfect clarity. It doesn't stop. The knot in my chest expanded again, stretching me from the inside. My skin felt too tight, every nerve humming under the strain. I could feel the individual weights settling into me, cataloguing themselves with clinical precision. Liver, kidney, slivers of lung, fractions of heartbeats shaved from 1,000 chests. I was filling up with borrowed substance. The figure observed in silence as the transfer continued. Its mask reflected the glow of the room, a blank mirror holding my distorted shape. I saw myself in it, one eye empty, socket filled with swirling darkness, veins branching out in delicate black filigree. The last tube detached. The circle of patients lay still, their breathing no longer synchronized, but blessedly individual. Some stirred weakly against their restraints. They were alive in a way they hadn't been when I entered, and I was heavy. Every movement felt like wading through deep water. The air pressed against me with intimate familiarity, as if recognizing a new center of gravity in the room. The bone planchette slid one final time. Keeper. The word burned. The figure stepped back into the shadows, its outline dissolving into the architecture of the space. The enormous room began to contract, the walls creeping inward. Beds rolled silently away, swallowed by the dark. The etched symbols faded under my feet. JD remained. The tubes that had fed him lay limp and empty. His posture sagged, the animating tension draining from his limbs. He looked smaller, lighter, like a structure with its scaffolding removed. I approached him on trembling legs. Up close, his skin was cool and dry. The wrong smile was gone. His face was slack with exhaustion. The red in his eyes had receded, leaving them a washed-out grey. "Can you hear me?" I whispered. His gaze focused with effort. A shallow nod. "Is there a way out of this?" His eyes flicked to my chest, to the invisible knot I could feel throbbing there. Then back to my face. Another nod. Hope flared, fragile and desperate. "How?" He raised a shaking hand and pressed 2 fingers against my sternum. The touch was feather light, but it resonated through me like a struck bell. The knot pulsed in response, sending a ripple of heaviness through my body. His lips formed a single word. Share. Understanding unfurled slowly, sick and inevitable. The weight inside me wasn't meant to stay contained. It was meant to be distributed, passed along in careful increments, balanced across as many vessels as necessary to keep the ledger even, to keep the system running. I thought of the hospital above us, of its endless stream of patients and procedures, of the city wrapped around it, dense with lives brushing against mine every day. The coffee shops and sidewalks and crowded trains, the casual contacts, the accidental touches, every handshake a transaction, every brush of skin a chance to offload a fraction of what I carried. Horror and a twisted, shameful relief tangled in my chest. I didn't want this burden. I didn't want to be the thing that fed on strangers. But the weight was already grinding me down, compressing my thoughts, threatening to crush me from the inside if I tried to hold it all. JD's fingers slipped from my chest. His arm fell to his side. His eyes drifted closed, and his breathing settled into a thin, steady rhythm. Not dead, not awake. Suspended in a fragile peace I suddenly envied. The room had shrunk to a narrow corridor. At the far end, an elevator waited with its doors open. I walked toward it, each step a negotiation with the mass I carried. The doors closed around me with a soft chime. The ascent was smooth this time, gentle. When they opened again, I was back in the lobby. The security desk was occupied. The guard glanced up and gave me a tired smile, the kind shared between night shift workers. "Long night?" he asked. His hand rested casually on the counter between us. I looked at it. The knot in my chest throbbed, eager and terrified. My own hand moved, slow as a confession, and settled over his. The contact was electric. A thread of darkness slid from me into him, invisible and undeniable. I felt the weight lighten by a hair's breadth. The guard blinked, a faint crease forming between his brows as something subtle rearranged inside him. Then he smiled again, none the wiser. "Get some rest," he said. I stepped out into the pre-dawn air. The city was waking up, lights flickering on in windows, engines turning over. People moved through the streets wrapped in their private concerns, their invisible numbers hovering just beyond ordinary sight. My phone buzzed. A notification from an app I didn't recognize. The icon was a small bone planchette. I opened it. A familiar interface bloomed on the screen. Columns of names and figures scrolled endlessly. At the top, my own total pulsed, vast and oppressive. Beneath it, a single instruction waited: maintain balance. I slipped the phone into my pocket and joined the flow of pedestrians heading toward the train. Shoulders bumped, hands brushed. With every incidental touch, I felt the knot ease by microscopic degrees, the burden dispersing into the crowd in careful, measured doses. No one screamed. No one noticed. The city breathed around me, alive and oblivious. And inside my chest, the ledger kept counting.
And that's it for tonight's story. Now let's move to the comments and see what they have to say about it.
Brother, I usually listen to these while I'm doing dishes, but I just stood in the middle of my kitchen with soap dripping off my hands for like 40 minutes. What the actual hell did I just experience? Another comment from u/plastic pancreas says, the idea of a person being used as a living ledger for surgeries across an entire hospital is so insanely disturbing. I don't even know where to begin. This felt like Silent Hill mixed with medical billing. I'm gonna go cry in a corner now. Ward 0 hit me like a brick. My uncle used to work night security at a hospital, and he swore there was a floor not on the map. He never joked about it. Always called it the floor with no time. I haven't thought about that in years. Okay. But let's talk about that bone planchette being made from a pelvis. That is... no. Just no. Why is that the detail that ruined my night? You just know whoever built that digital interface on the deep web is still watching. The whole live organ weight tracking thing. There's probably dozens of other keepers out there right now, moving through public spaces, offloading piece by piece like viruses. This story wasn't horror. This was a warning. I thought I was numb to horror stories. But this is like if Cronenberg directed a medical drama and made you star in it. I'm not even kidding. I feel tainted after reading this. I used to be a surgical nurse. The weight matching stuff, that's real. We track tissue down to grams. If someone messed with that system, yeah, you're not supposed to tell stories like this. I'm turning off my phone now. Can't stop thinking about how many people you walk past every day who might be carrying for someone else. Like they're leaking trauma through skin contact. This story didn't just creep me out. It infected me.
So that's it for tonight's episode. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, make sure to like, comment down below, and also don't forget to check the other videos. See you in the next one.